Hello and welcome to episode 110 of Driver Suit Blog Radio. As always, I'm your host, David G. Firestone. I just want to make a note about something that happened last week. During my discussion on Stepstool Stera, I inadvertently referred to them as her because Stepstool Stera is non-binary. So if I offended anybody, I really didn't mean to, and I apologize for it. Now, with that out of the way, I just finished watching the Atlanta race, and the Atlanta race was fun. For years, I despised Atlanta because for a myriad of reasons not even worth getting into here, but the new mini super speedway configuration has provided some great racing. But I think one of the big stories coming out of Atlanta this weekend was Joey Logano. As it was announced just before the race started that Logano was penalized by NASCAR. I'm going to quote NASCAR themselves, link in the description. Quote, NASCAR officials penalized Team Penske driver Joey Logano on Sunday for wearing unapproved safety gloves, ruling that the number 22 Ford will drop to the rear of the field and serve a pass-through on pit road for the start of Sunday's Cup Race Series at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Logano was found in violation of Section 14.3.1.1, parentheses, driver protective clothing/equipment, end parentheses, in the NASCAR rulebook, which requires that protective gloves meet SFI-approved specifications. Logano was scheduled to set sail from the second starting spot in Sunday's 400-miler, the second of 36 point-paying races of the season for the Cup Series. And Logano will be required to enter pit road to serve his penalty at the first opportunity after Sunday's green flag. The penalty is especially costly given the length of Atlanta's pit road with an entrance that begins at turn 3, apron on the 1.54-mile oval. Now, this was initially up for speculation as to what NASCAR was talking about, but it got quickly clarified that the glove in question was a left glove used in qualifying. Apparently, you can use the glove to block air in the car. I don't watch qualifying, so I'd never really noticed that before. But this particular glove had a piece of webbing, and this configuration was apparently not SFI approved, thus the penalty. Okay, so I get what he was trying to do in theory. I really do. But here's my question. How else did he think this was going to end? Do people not really understand that the officials are everywhere and that you're going to get busted for cheating if you try? Did Logano think that nobody would notice he had a clearly modified glove on? And I would be asking that if he was just a regular if he was a regular driver without an in-car camera pointed directly at his face, which clearly showed the offending glove. I mean, they tell you that there's going to be I'm presuming they're telling you there's going to be a camera in your car, okay? Why would you wear something that's obviously illegal in full view of a camera that you know it's there? Again, do people not understand the concept of evidence in this day and age? If people can prove that you cheated, you're going to get caught. How is he that dumb that he didn't think of this prior to going out for qualification? I mean, right now, he's got nobody to blame but himself. I have no idea how he thought it would work. Obviously, it didn't. And even though he did rebound a bit, his race wasn't what it could have been. So, this week some news came out about the current NASCAR Charter Series situation. I'm going to quote J-Ski, which quotes Sports Business Journal, links to both in the description. We're going to go in chronological order. This was, I think I already read this, but I'll read it again. Quote, as the calendar turns to February, sources say the teams unanimously agreed not to extend their agreement with NASCAR a further month, a symbolic move that designs to highlight their unhappiness with the state of talks. NASCAR technically does not need a deal with a majority or unanimous number of teams for there to be a new charter agreement, but teams currently seeking together, and NASCAR for the moment is negotiating with team self-appointed team negotiating committee. On that committee are JGR President Dave Alprin, RFK President Steve Newmark, 2311 Racing investor Curtis Polk, and Hendricks Motorsports Vice Chair Jeff Gordon. In the absence of a formal negotiation window with the current charter extending less than a year. Teams can now technically go shop rights for other racing series. NASCAR and the Race Team Alliance, a coalition of 15 NASCAR teams, both declined to comment. The exact many deal points of this decided their loggerheads on what was unclear, but teams have been seeking permanent charters among other asks on top of the additional revenue. Although not a certainty, one of those who was familiar with the situation said that a deal was likely months away, and most industry executives believe a deal will be reached. So that was old news. Here's the first of two updates. Well, actually, you know what? I'm not even going to read the first update because it's literally the same thing as what I just said. Now, this is the one that came out on February 24th, the day before I'm reading this. Update. February 24th, 2024. NASCAR is offering to extend the charter system for 7 years concurrent to its new media rights agreement, according to 4 sources familiar with the talks, as teams fight for something closer to a permanent status for their fusion of franchises. Sources say NASCAR's offer is to extend the charter system from 2025 through 2031. Teams want the system locked into the NASCAR rules in perpetuity, along with getting additional guaranteed media revenue and in addition to getting media revenue. There's a period after that. It's 3 o'clock in the morning and I just had an energy drink. As a middle ground, teams are open to something resembling an evergreen status where they keep the charter permanently as long as they meet a list of requirements that would be agreed upon by NASCAR, such as running every race. NASCAR and the Race Team Alliance had no comment on the specific terms being discussed when contracted. Now, here's my takeaway from that. The good news is that there does appear to be some progress in the charter negotiation systems. I mean, considering the fact that earlier in the month, it would seem like there was going to be no progress, that's actually a good thing. But the bad news is it's becoming increasingly apparent that the teams are going to get screwed over in this deal no matter what. Now, it is absolutely in NASCAR's best interest for the teams to be profitable and successful. I have no idea why they wouldn't want to be. Yet with the costs of buying new cars seemingly every 4 or 5 years and a myriad of other reasons, teams are not profitable and many of them are struggling across the board. Now granted, the 1990s boom is over. That's been clear for a while. But there needs to be a steady source of revenue for teams, and NASCAR should provide at least some of it. The fewer teams on track means fewer cars in the races, and fewer fans are going to show up to the races as such. The more teams go bust, the worse the situation gets. And I've said this before. When it comes to deals and viewership and all that blah, 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 NASCAR needs to focus on what they have, not what they want. I've seen the ratings for Daytona and the Clash, and they're good, and they're not good. Now, the ratings for the Clash and Daytona are not good, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. But NASCAR needs to do more to ensure the teams are going to function, because no teams mean no NASCAR. Now, does this mean that the teams are probably gonna go to another sanctioning body? Probably not. Where are they gonna go? No other racing series in the United States has the money and the resources that NASCAR does. So the whole idea that, they're gonna go found their own sanctioning body, it's like Ferrari. When they say, we're going to form our own sanctioning body, no, you're not. It's not going to work, and it's going to fail. But I think NASCAR really, really, really should figure out a way to pump some badly needed finances into the teams. Because NASCAR needs the teams, and the teams need NASCAR. It's just that simple. And this new TV deal, I think it benefits everybody if money is pumped into the teams. Now, I mentioned a few minutes ago the ratings for the Clash and Daytona. They're not good, but I think it needs to be pointed out that both suffered due to forces that were beyond NASCAR or Fox's control. Due to the historical rainstorm in California, the Clash at the Coliseum was moved up from Sunday to Saturday, and I think it was also switched from Fox to FS1. Yeah, it was switched to FS1. I don't remember if it was from Fox or FS1 prior. but they lost a lot of viewers because the 2023 edition had a 2.01 rating and 3,647,000 viewers. The 2024 Busch Class on Saturday had a 0.8 rating and 1.5 million viewers. They lost 2,136,000 viewers. No, excuse me. They lost 2,136,000 viewers. Then we have the Daytona 500, which was moved to Monday due to rain on Sunday. And even with President's Day and a lot of people being off, it still suffered because the 2023 edition, which was I think on a Sunday, had a 4.40 rating and 8,170,000 viewers. The 2023 Daytona 500 had a 3.3 rating and 4,830,000 viewers. They lost 3,340,000 viewers for this year's iteration of the Daytona 500, which was a great race, by the way. Now, while some are clutching pearls and wringing of hands at these numbers, again, both of these numbers are the direct result of rescheduling due to inclement weather, which was completely out of NASCAR's hands, and I think in both instances they made the right decisions. Can't blame NASCAR or anyone else on this one. They were in between a rock and a hard place. They made the best decision they could, so it's not really their fault. But I'll be interested to see what Atlanta ratings are, because at the time of recording I haven't seen them yet. Let's see how a race that airs when it was advertised, let's see how well that does. I'm going to get to those numbers maybe next week. I've got quite a few things I'm working on this week. So we'll talk about that next week. And I'm going to take my break, only 2 segments this week, and I'm going to discuss AEW for the next and final segment. I'll be right back. Welcome back. I've discussed wrestling in its various forms on this channel before, and I'm going to be discussing it again. Now, this episode comes off the heels of the Elimination Chamber in Perth, Australia, and there's a bit of a controversy going on right now, claiming that apparently Perth, Australia paid WWE $5 million to have a pay-per-view in their stadium, which on the surface of it sounds kind of iffy in terms of morals, but they had a very hot crowd and a crowd that was very into it. And that's always good when you're having a pay-per-view. The fans were into it. They were loving it. I think the right people won in terms of who won and who lost. And obviously WWE is dealing with a lot of controversy right now, but this is a chance you'd think for AEW to capitalize on this, but they don't. I mean, I've discussed the train wreck that is AEW and their feckless owner Tony Khan before, and I've discussed their issues with CM Punk. But I think a lot of people don't really understand Tony Khan the way they should. So I've had this in my research folder for a while, and I'm going to talk about it today. Now, wrestling journalism can be just as tribeless as a wrestling fan base. And when it comes to wrestling quote-unquote journalism, there's a lot of anti-WWE outlets out there that will support any and all opposition to WWE, and this includes the fan base. I've read things where people say that, well, if you're not a fan of the indies, you're not really a wrestling fan, you're just a WWE fan. I'm like, huh? I don't watch indie wrestling because most of it's garbage anyway. But this is an article from November 22nd, 2022. The link is in the description. This is from PW Insider, who are notoriously neutral and report factual information as opposed to fluff pieces and hit pieces. And this is from Dave Shearer. And again, all credit goes to Dave Shearer and PW Insider again. This article is entitled, Tony Khan's quote-unquote investigation was a complete and total joke and, sadly, is the perfect representation of the way he runs AEW. Here is the article in its entirety by Dave Shearer. Quote, in a satirical movie about my native Hungary's darkest communist era, there is a scene in which a trial witness gets his prepared testimony speech and famously proclaims, but comrade, this is the verdict. Is it just me, or am I getting the same vibe from the investigation into the Punk Elite scandal? That it was biased at best and a farce at worst? Not interviewing key witnesses, destroying evidence, and AEW-friendly media outlets writing hit pieces on Punk singing he was a quote-unquote cancer and acted like a quote-unquote psycho make me believe he was set up to be scapegoated from the start. By no means do I think Punk is innocent, but AEW is not fixing his problems because Punk being quote-unquote cancer wasn't the core issue here. He was reacting, rather unprofessionally, to a pre-existing issue in the backstage culture of AEW that is seemingly left untouched by all of this. The investigation. If Tony Khan had only been transparent and shared with the media the details of the investigation, we wouldn't have to piece together what happened. For a man that loves doing 2-hour media scrums after 5-hour-long pay-per-views where he can say how great everything in AEW is, he has no interest in sharing details real reporters and their readers/listeners want to know, and just watch his painful interview with Ariel Helwani if you doubt that. I'm going to stop it right here for a second. Go watch that interview. I've never seen somebody go out of their way to set up an interview and then answer every question with, I plead the fifth. It's actually fascinating. Getting back to the article, since Tony won't share any facts, all we can do is surmise things we know to be true and add what has been quote-unquote reported, so here goes. From what I've heard and seen, the quote-unquote investigation was a farce. Even if we ignore the fact that it took 2 months for the crack team of sleuths to figure out what happened in a 5-minute incident, any legitimate investigator would have interviewed every single witness. They wouldn't cherry-pick the people who give the company, in this case Tony Khan, the funding that they were looking for, especially when it involved officers of the company, as 3 of those under investigation were executive vice presidents, the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega. Clearly talking to Ace Steel's wife about what went on would have most probably contradicted the outcome Tony Khan seemingly wanted. So, according to reports, she was ignored. Why? Unless she and her husband were paid a sum of money for the silence, it seems pretty clear that the story would not have allowed the EVPs to come out looking like the victims, which no fair person could ever say since they barged into Punk's locker room uninvited. You can make a case that Punk was more wrong if he threw the first punch, but the Jackson boys were also wrong for going in there in the first place, especially when you consider that they are officers in the company, parentheses, which I know a lot of AEW media doesn't seem to understand or chooses to ignore to fit their slanted narrative. The irony is that while Tony Khan was sitting next to CM Punk at the scrum, shaking his head in agreement to most of the things Punk said like a marionette puppet, and even flat out repeating what he told Forbes that he himself was wrong for not publicly correcting the false quote-unquote story that Punk held Colt Cabana back over, he gave the appearance that he supported Punk all while his star was unprofessionally eviscerating the company. Khan never contradicted him or made any attempt to stop him at the scrum. I guess after the fact he did a 180. Maybe Chris Jericho and the EVPs got in his ear, and as we are now suddenly hearing quote-unquote stories from AEW-friendly outlets that Punk was a locker room cancer, and Jericho put on his Superman suit and gave Phil Brooks a stern talking to after the altercation. Of course, for the first 2 months after the incident, Jericho's supposed leadership and heroism was never mentioned. It might very well be untrue, but hell, so was the planned Punk got Colt pushed off TV story, and look at all the damage that one's caused AEW. This one could do just as much damage as Khan seems to have chosen an almost 52-year-old Chris Jericho and the EVPs, those with the decision of losing hundreds of thousands of viewers from the start of Dynamite with their segments. Kenny's return and the Trios tournament storyline aired at the end of shows. But again, if the goal was to find the EVPs innocent and Punk guilty, mission accomplished. The question of why Punk acted as he did was pretty clear. Tony Khan lets the inmates run the asylum. Hangman Page goes off script and shoots on Punk in a promo. Punk shoots back. It was a perfect time to tell the wrestlers to knock that stuff off. He didn't. Someone plants a lie friendly to AEW friendly outlets that Punk got Colt Cabana first on TV. They run with it, even though Cabana was hardly on TV anyway, and when he was, it was in a comedy group. It fits the apologist narratives, since they like the EVPs and hate Punk, so they run with it. What does Tony do? Nothing. He lets it fester and then much later admits he was wrong. Brilliant. What led Punk to blow up? These events and many more. When he said he works with children, I think he nailed it. Now keep in mind, what I'm about to read is from 2022, and he didn't actually leave the company until 2023. So just to clarify that, back to the article. Quote, now Punk is seemingly being forced out of the company for, I guess, starting a fight. This isn't allowed in AEW. Well, unless Sammy Guevara attacks Andrade on Twitter and Andrade hits him at TV. I guess if you invite Tony to your wedding, you can get stuff like that. Too bad for Punk, he is already happily married. Moving on, I love the AEW friendly narrative that was all Punk's fault because he allegedly threw the first punch. I don't know about you, but I just called out 3 pro wrestlers and said that if you have a problem with it, come see me, and then they angrily burst into my locker room uninvited, I would think they would be there to get a piece of me. I sure wouldn't let that happen. I would go down swinging too. If you don't want me to hit you, then don't burst into my locker room uninvited. Adding to the fact that these guys are also officers in the company, they were arguably more wrong than Punk because they should realize that by doing what they did, they give Punk cause to sue the company. Nobody was right here. They shouldn't have burst in and Punk shouldn't have hit them. If they come back, he should come back, and if Tony chooses them over Punk, he should be paying him a sizable portion of the con fortune not to wrestle for AEW, and I believe he will because Punk has all the leverage here. So, on Dynamite at the time of this article's writing, on Dynamite this week, Colt Cabana was on TV with Chris Jericho, and at least one AEW apologist said that quote-unquote proved all along that Punk kept Cabana off TV. Good Lord, to be that clueless. I won't get into how wrong that person was today, but the fact of the matter is Cabana on TV was a clear F-you to Punk. Can't be seen any other way by a sane person. Was it Jericho's idea? Was it Khan's? If I had to guess, I would say Jericho suggested it and the head booker went with it. It doesn't matter because in the end it was a firing on his wedding day kind of thing to do. Now, for those of you who don't know, when Punk left the WWE 10 years ago, Vince McMahon sent him his legal paperwork via FedEx, and it happened to arrive at his house on his wedding day. And Punk was really mad about this. Now, maybe Vince did mean to do it this way, maybe he didn't, but it did end up keeping Punk away from WWE for much longer than it could have been. So anyway, back to the article. Maybe the reason Khan sat at the scrum agreeing with Punk and certainly not shutting him down in any way was due to the fact that he knew Punk was the company's biggest draw. After all, he had made that extremely clear to reporters at earlier scrums. In the moment, maybe he was thinking like a businessman and let his top star vent about true issues that he himself had caused. Maybe despite his unprofessional way of delivering the message, he also heard the truth that Punk was saying and realized it was about time to get the backstage environment under control. You know, like WWE. Oh, wait, you're serious? Well, let me laugh even harder. Hasn't happened yet. Then maybe once you got away from the straight shooting Punk and back him on the more savvy wrestlers who know how to push all the buttons that Conrad have pushed, he changes his mind. Or maybe he just like owning a wrestling company, being a booker, which he can do with his family fortune. We would know more if Khan would be more transparent and actually tell us, but he doesn't seem to want to do that, which is ironic given that he's always been an inside information smart fan, and yet when he starts with his own company, he does interviews like Busted Open where he often speaks about his company like it's not predetermined entertainment. When he started, he said he wanted to give fans an alternative to WWE. At first, it was a good one. Now it's like Dixie Carter, Vince Russo, TNA, which I'm not even going to get into that because that's a whole other can of worms itself. Dave Scherer continues, so with that, here's my take. Again, it's not just me putting together what I know. It's just me putting together what I know, not facts. I don't want to be like the other reporters that present their opinion as truth. It appears that after time passed, he thought, sure, Punk is a draw, but he's not my friend like Jericho and the EVPs, and the die was cast. In Tony's world, friends matter. Did he get help in coming to that point of view? Well, wrestlers are workers for a reason. Jericho has assumed a lot of power in the promotion in Punk's absence. That doesn't seem like a coincidence, especially with the aforementioned AEW friendly outlets, quote unquote, reporting things that cast Chris Jericho in a great light. That's why some wrestlers have some reporters in their back pocket to work the masses. Did that happen here? I can't say. Now, the big question here is, did Khan make the right decision? I think you already know where I'm going with that on this, but back to the article. Time will tell, but the signs so far aren't positive. As was really clear from Dynamite in Baltimore, attendance is way down since All Out and Punk and the EVP suspension. If you go to their ticket website, not only are there plenty of tickets available for every show, but very large portions of the building aren't even for sale. A problem that continues to this day. The Arthur Ashe shows this year didn't come close to what they did last year, and no one was really sure what was going on with Punk and the EVPs at that point in time. Now that the absence of Punk and the EVPs has set in a pattern seemingly forming, and it's not good that ticket sales are concerned. I know some quote-unquote supportive observers are blaming the loss of sales on the EVPs not being there, which fits their narrative, because some had said from the beginning that if Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks got on national TV, they would pass WWE within a year or so. Well, the EVPs were on TV last week, and Baltimore didn't get a big bump in ticket sales, neither did the Dynamite rating. Atlantic City did not get a bump in sales either, and again, let's not forget that the Bucks and Omega segments before they left were losing viewers in a big way. I don't see any world where the people will turn off free TV when those guys came on but spend money to go watch them live, but I'm not an apologist in vain trying to be right about something that I was clearly wrong about. And let's not forget that before this room, Khan said the All Out was down significantly from last year. He blamed WWE running for events, but I think the main reason was the terrible handling of the Punk John Moxley program and the booking overall. He could have made that show a draw for the title match alone, but after the ridiculousness 4-minute bout from Dynamite a few weeks before, it turned off many buyers. I've heard from dozens of people saying that after doing the FU to Punk, they're done with AEW, but that's anecdotal evidence at best. What we do know is that all signs point Punk to being gone after putting Cabana in the match against Jericho. Spoiler alert, that didn't happen. The EVPs are back and Punk is gone. Will this be AEW's finger poke of doom moment? Time will tell. And that's the end of this article. Now, I'm going to have a sip of water before I start making my points. Okay. If you are not a wrestling fan, and a lot of you aren't, a lot of people in this country aren't, there's 340 million people and maybe 3 million a week watch wrestling. So there's a lot of people who aren't wrestling fans. But if you're not a wrestling fan, having heard all of this, many of you are wondering, how in the fuck hell is this company still in business? Well, AEW is not your typical wrestling company. AEW really doesn't need to make money to stay around, at least for the time being. See, Tony Khan isn't just some random schlub who stumbled into the wrestling business. He's the son of Shad Khan, who is the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, and a billionaire. Everything, this is, by the way, all provable, by the way. Shad Khan gave Tony his inheritance early so he could found his own wrestling promotion. And he gave Tony Khan his inheritance, and AEW exists as a direct result. Okay? AEW is not profitable, but at the same time, it isn't exactly starving for cash either, because they do have a dedicated group of fans. They do have a video game. Granted, it's not great, but they do have a lot of things that many smaller promotions don't have. But the money is stable, but for how much longer? Again, this article was from a year and a half ago, and they were talking about low ticket sales, low admissions, and low viewership. They would be killing for what they had 2 years ago right now. They literally have gone a year without having drawn 1 million people to any one of their AEW Dynamite telecasts. 1 full year. The numbers are getting worse. the television numbers are shrinking. And for a lot of these promotions, at this point, it would be a question of when, not if, the plug gets pulled. Now, AEW is currently with Warner Brothers Discovery on TBS and TNT, but that contract is up for grabs as well because there's no indication that there's been any progress on the TV deal with Warner Brothers Discovery. And with a seeming lack of a TV deal on the horizon, the plug may get pulled sooner rather than later. Whether or not Warner Brothers Discovery re-signs AEW is questionable at best. But even with the current climate, there are plenty of other TV deal AEW options for AEW. But unless something drastically changes, those are going to start decreasing soon. And I am not an anti-AEW guy. I like AEW. I enjoy watching AEW. I don't have the problems that some people do with AEW. I want AEW to have a good television deal. But I'm smart enough at this point in my life to be able to like something and at the same time see that there are fundamental flaws with how it's being run and how it works. And like most other of these companies, the problems all start at the top. Most companies have problems at the top. Nobody gives a shit what the janitor thinks about how the boardroom meeting is going. But if the company fails, it's not the janitor's fault. And a lot of the people who are at the top of these companies have no self-awareness to see when they're screwing up. Now, Tony Khan's probably the most egregious one, but there's plenty of other examples. There was one of these, I forget specifically what they did, but it was a startup that got bought out by Google a few years ago. And they kept the entire team except the one woman who was the owner and founder of the startup. And she goes on this, oh, Google is sexist rant, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there reading this like, no, they're not sexist. You're an idiot. Because if one of the most powerful companies looks at a company and thinks, okay, the technology is great, but the woman in charge is what's holding this back, then guess what? You're the problem. That's what I'm seeing with Tony Khan, but nobody is going to be able to outmaneuver Tony Khan. That's just the way it is. And I read this article because this shows Tony's mindset in various ways. He doesn't want to actually be a leader. He wants to be friends with the wrestlers. I have a lot of people I like at work, but if I'm a boss, I can't let my personal feelings get in the way. And that's why I've said this before. It's a quote from Colin Cowherd. Everybody likes the nice guy at the office with the mean people suck bumper sticker and the bowl full of candy, but when shit hits the fan, they are the last person you want in charge. You need somebody who needs to make quick and decisive decisions for the betterment of the company and the benefit of the employees. And these are not easy decisions, and you're going to hurt people's feelings. Tony Khan doesn't want to be the decisive leader. That's why I said he's feckless. There is absolutely no reason whatsoever that CM Punk couldn't still be in AEW and couldn't still be making millions of dollars for the company, and they could draw $1 million houses and million viewer episodes of Dynamite. But Tony Khan is the reason AEW is in the state that it's in. It's not the wrestlers. It's Tony Khan. And again, he loves people telling you what you want to hear. He will, if you're an AEW friendly outlet, he'll answer questions till the cows come home. But when you approach him seriously, he clams up. As I said before, watch Ariel Helwani and his interview with Tony Khan, because I've never seen anybody in an entire interview plead the fifth at every given opportunity, especially when Tony Khan set the interview up. I want AEW to succeed. But I'm smart enough to realize that there are a lot of holes that need patching. And Tony Khan, I don't think he has it in him. And after bad decision after bad decision, screw up after screw up, miscue after miscue, missed opportunity after missed opportunity, how much longer can this continue? I optimistically want AEW to survive. Realistically, I just don't see it happening. Time will tell, but I'm not being optimistic here because I just can't. Whew, that was depressing. And with that, episode 110 comes to an end. I'll figure out something for next week. This one was pretty heavy, I do admit. I'm Dave Fresling. If you like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next week.